Alright, let's talk about Spring Data 2024.1, the biggest update yet. They are calling it a game changer. It's double-edged sword. Sure, it looks shiny, but this update, it could either make you a hero or completely destroy everything you build. Let's start with value expressions. Sounds innocent, right? Wrong, they're letting you inject Spring Expressions language directly into your queries now. Dynamically queries. How cool is that? Until it isn't. One misplaced placeholder, one tiny error, and suddenly your database is spitting out garbage. Or worse, nothing at all. You'll need to sit there at 3 AM, staring at your screen, wondering where it all went wrong. Here's the kicker, it won't just break your code, it breaks your spirit. Now let's move to the SPI extension. Oh, Spring makes it sound so simple, just register your type in Spring factories. Easy, right? Wrong again. What they don't tell you is that this convenient externalization comes with a cost. Bloated repositories, endless debugging, performance drops that make your application feel like, but hey, you say it's modular, it's scalable. Sure, it's modular, just like Legos, and just like Legos, one wrong piece can bring the whole thing crashing down. And then there is Cassandra Couchbase qualification. Oh, it's neat, alright, you can leverage multiple Couchbase in a single application now. But let me ask you this, did anyone bother to warn you about the complexity this adds? Of course not, because complexity is your problem, not Spring's. And let's not forget the Micrometer integration, observability on steroids. They tell you it's seamless, that it underprints metric and time series, tracing like a dream. But guess what? That dream turns into a nightmare the moment you try to configure it with your specific distributed tracing setup. And then there are deprecations. Oh yes, the sweet deprecation. They're hiding in plain sight, scattered across the projects. Didn't notice them? That's fine. Spring will remind you next year, when Spring Framework 7 or Spring Boot 4 roll out, and rip those deprecated features out of your code. Gone forever. Don't say I didn't warn you. But let's be fair, Spring Data 2024.1 does have its perks. The GPA Query Enhancer, incredible performance gains, the new specification builder and SQL generator, super handy, and yes, value expressions when used responsibly and insanely powerful. But here is the thing, responsibly. Are you ready to use them responsibly? Because one moment of overconfidence, one bad implementation, and this update will chew you up and split you out. And trust me, Spring has no mercy. So here's my advice, don't jump into the update blind. Take your time, learn the features, understand the pitfalls, because new Spring Data isn't just a release, it's a test of your skills, your patience, your very sanity. And if you are not ready for it, it will break you. Good luck, you're going to need it. Let me show you something deceptively simple, something you might copy and paste into your codebase without a second thought. And that would be your first mistake. The tiny piece of code, it's innocent looking, a simple Spring configuration, but don't be fooled. It's not just a helper, it's loaded gun. If you are not careful, it's pointing straight at your production environment. Simple, right? Just registering a property dynamically looks like a neat little utility, but what they don't tell you is how quickly this can spiral out of control. This little dynamic property register, it's like handing over the keys to your entire environment. You're dynamically injecting properties at runtime. Sounds powerful, but here's the catch. It's fragile and unpredictable, and it can break in ways you won't notice until it's too late. Think about it, you've added this property dynamically message, seems harmless, right? But let's say another team member decides to register a property with the same key in another part of the codebase. Who wins? Do you even know? Because Spring won't stop you. It's just take the last one registered and then chaos. Now let's talk about testing. You probably added this for your tests, right? To inject dynamic properties on the fly makes sense, but here's where it gets ugly. What happens when your test environment doesn't match your production environment? When those dynamic properties introduce subtle differences that you don't catch in development. your test will pass, everything will seem fine, but when you deploy, boom, silent. Creeping failures that are nightmare to debug. And don't even get me started on scalability. Sure, this works when you're dealing with a handful of properties, but what happens when you're managing dozens, hundreds? Are you seriously going to keep track of all dynamic registrations? Are you ready to shift through logs at 2 AM trying to figure out why your service can't find the property it needs? But hey, go ahead, use this in production, trust that everything will just work. What could possibly go wrong? And here's the real kicker. This isn't just about your code, it's about everyone else's code too. Your property registry, it's a global state, a shared sandbox. And you're not the only one playing it. One misstep by another team, one careless registration and your code breaks. But guess who gets blamed? Not them, you, because you're the one who thought it was a good idea to rely on dynamically injected properties in the first place. Don't get me wrong, dynamically properties have their place, they are powerful, flexible, but they are also a trap, slippery slope that can lead to debugging hell, scalability nightmare and production outages that could have been avoided. So use this if you must, but treat carefully. Spring gives you power, but with this power comes responsibility, and if you're not ready to wield it, well, you'll find out the hard way. Alright, buckle up, what you're about to see might look like just another Spring feature, but trust me, it's not. This tiny snippet of code, it's Trojan horse, a trap that can unravel your entire internationalization strategy if you are not careful. Let me introduce you to Locale Evaluation Context Extension. It's simple, it's clever, and it's dangerous. At first glance, it looks harmless, right? A simple Spring component. It grabs the locale from locale context holder and make it available as a evaluation context extension for Spring expression language. Elegant, straightforward, what could possibly go wrong? Let's break this down. The whole idea here is to provide dynamic locale information to your expressions. Sounds amazing on paper, but let me tell you where this can and will go wrong. First off, locale context holder, it's thread bound. That means it's tied to the current request thread. In perfectly controlled environment, this is fine, but let's be real. When the last time you worked with perfectly controlled environment? Imagine a scenario. A user request is processing on one thread and the locale context holder is populated with their locale. Great, but then a microservice makes an asynchronous call or a thread pool get involved. Suddenly the locale context is gone, or worse, it's wrong. And don't even get me started on asynchronous processing. If your application handles tasks in a non-blocking way, locale context holder won't follow. Instead, you will get whatever locale happens to be in context at the moment, or none at all. You think debugging concurrency issues is hard? Try debugging locale-specific concurrency issues. It's like herding cats, but the cats are on fire. And let's not forget about testing. How are you planning to test this? Are you going to mock locale context holder? Are you going to write a million unit tests for every possible locale scenario? Because if you don't, you're flying blind, and when the bugs come, and they will come, you'll have no idea where to start. Now, don't get me wrong, this feature isn't all bad. It has its place. If you are building something small, something synchronous, something where you have complete control over the request lifecycle, this can be a useful tool. But if you are building anything more complex, anything that involves microservices, asynchronous processing, or global scaling, forget it. Just forget it. Internalization is hard, it's complicated, and it demands precision. Features like this, they're tempting. They make you think you found a shortcut. But shortcuts like this, they're traps that cost you time, money, and your sanity. So here's my advice: think twice before using this, understand the risks, and if you do, then use it. Alright, take a deep breath. What you're about to see isn't just a repository, it's a trap, a time bomb hiding inside your codebase, just waiting for the perfect moments to blow you in your face. This might look like an advanced use of Spring Data, but let me tell you, it's anything but safe. Let's dive into the seemingly innocent customer repository, because trust me, the devil is in the details. Looks smart, right? Dynamic table names, dynamic locale-based filtering, even system properties tied directly to queries. It's kind of the code that makes you feel like a genius when you write it. But let me show you why this is a terrible idea. Let's start with the first method, all. It dynamically injects the table name into the query using Spring Expression language. Sounds cool. But ask yourself this: where is table name coming from? If you are managing it dynamically through spell context, you've just opened the door to runtime chaos. What happens when the table name is missing? Or worse, when someone injects the wrong table name? Imagine querying the wrong table in production, pulling in data that does not belong to you, or worse, accidentally overwriting something critical. That's not just a bug, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Now let's talk about find customer by system language. It uses locale.language to dynamically resolve the system language. Clever, right? This relies on locale context holder to provide the current thread locale. But here's the thing about thread-bound contexts: they're not foolproof. What happens if asynchronous processing? What happens when a background thread doesn't have the locale set correctly? I'll tell you what happens. Your query fails, or worse, it returns partial or incorrect results. And when that happens in production, good luck explaining it to your boss. So, what's the takeaway here? Sure, this repository looks fancy, it makes you feel like you're leveraging the full power of Spring Data, but let me tell you something: clever code is expensive, it's fragile, it's hard to test, and when it breaks, it will break. It will cost you more time, money, and sanity than you ever thought possible. Spring gives you tools, powerful tools, but just because you can use them doesn't mean you should. Sometimes simplicity beats cleverness. Sometimes hardcoding a query is better than injecting one dynamically, because when you keep things simple, you keep them safe.